The U.S. Constitution, and it became the law of the land. The document created a strong national government with checks and balances. It also gave some power to the states. A few states refused to sign on until they cut a deal that helped establish the Bill of Rights. And our nation finalized the documents to create a more perfect union 229 years ago today. Should news break out, we'll break in, because breaking news changes everything on Fox News Channel. Your World with Neil Cavuto coming up next, and I'm guessing he'll be talking about the Dow and the NASDAQ and oil, which has settled into a recent low, hovering right around $42 a barrel. That's hurting some fracking enterprises and making their stocks go down. There's a lot of movement in the markets today. Who better to break it down than the man, Neil Cavuto? I'm Shepard Smith. I'll see you in News Breaks.
All right, thank you, Shepard, very much. And you're right about that oil. That's in a bear market. We're going to get into that a little bit here, but I do want to bring you up to date on what we're waiting for here. An FBI news conference at Bishop International Airport in Flint, Michigan, where an officer you might have heard was stabbed in the neck earlier today. Now, the FBI, who already took in his assailant, is not ruling out terrorism. We'll get to the details, but the agency is investigating. Witness reports that the suspect apparently shouted "Allahu Akbar" during that incident. God is great. The officer was seen bleeding from the neck. He was in critical condition. I understand right now he is considered in stable condition. He's been identified as Lieutenant Jeff Neville. His condition, again, deemed stable. We're told that the White House has been alerted to all of this. The president now knows all about this. Whether he updates us or passes along a tweet or comment, we'll, of course, pass that along as well. Meanwhile, this is the morning after, and Republicans are breathing a big old sigh of relief. They are now 4 for 4 in these special elections, and after what happened in Georgia, after what happened in South Carolina, and certainly after what happened in Kansas, and finally Montana, they're breathing a sigh of relief that they survived in all of them and kept all of those seats. That's where it ends, because the details and the underbelly of that story, quite a different picture for both parties to take note of. Fox Business Network's Connell McShane has been doing a little bit of that digging. Connell.
Well, Neil, last night was a strong night for the Republicans, but as we take a closer look and dig deeper into the numbers, we know that neither party can relax heading into the midterms in 2018. Pay close attention to margin of victory. Karen Handel on the Republican side in Georgia did win by 3.8 percentage points. But when Tom Price was running, now a member of the cabinet, his victory had a margin of 23.2%. And we saw that in the other races as well. I think South Carolina was a big surprise to a lot of people. Sure, the Republicans hung on and won 3.2 percentage point victory. But last time around, it was Mick Mulvaney, now the budget director, with a 20-point win. And as the Republicans have gone 4 for 4 in these special elections, we've seen it in Montana. 15.8% down now to plus 5.6%. We also saw it in Kansas, where a more than 30-point victory for the Republicans last time around last year, down to 6.2% in the special election. So what does it all mean? Well, we have to look at the balance of power heading into the midterm elections next year and know that the Democrats certainly have some ground to make up, and they're going to have to start turning these close but no cigar races into actual victories. But they don't have to win them all. Remember, the magic number is 218. So for the Democrats to flip that over and get control of the House, they need to net a total of 24 seats next year. Neil, back over to you.
All right, thank you very, very much, Connell. The closeness of these elections, particularly some of these special events and the recent ones by just a couple of points, is that a message to Republicans that they shouldn't get too ahead of themselves here? Independent Journal Review's Aaron McPike with us now. Aaron, what do you think? What's the sense? I guess relief on the part of the people in that building behind you that they still have all those seats, but it was close.
It was close. Now, Neil, I do think we tend to read too much into special elections at some points, but I do think here we're seeing a number of very close races. I think especially that South Carolina race last night that was much tighter than anybody expected should be a bit of a warning sign to Republicans. And I also think that we're going to see Democrats roll out some really strong recruits over the next 6 months or so who will be much better than some of the candidates who have run in these special elections so far, especially the two last night. And at that point, you know, Republicans are going to need to start to get in gear here, because when Democrats have better recruits, you know, candidates matter, and good campaigns can get about 5 percentage points over what the average might be, and that means they could really have some wins.
All right, but when you look at what they're trying to see here, the way clear, how close it is in these races versus what it was back in November last year in the actual election. A win is a win, obviously,
right,
but it's a lot narrower than it was back then. Now, things have changed, and races and the environment changes as well. Special elections, to your point, are a different breed altogether. But is there a sense here that voters gave Republicans just a leash to sort of keep running, but get this other stuff done?
I think that is reading too much into it. What I do think we know so far is that Democrats aren't running on anything. They're just running against Donald Trump. And Republicans did a better job of tying the Democrat to Nancy Pelosi and the leadership. And we heard Tim Ryan, one of the younger Democratic congressmen, say today, we need new leadership. The Democratic brand is bad. We need to be for something. And Democrats are going to have to figure out what that agenda is going to be. Republicans obviously do have an agenda, but they're not pushing anything through. And Republicans are at odds with each other, and they're at odds with the White House, and that's creating some friction for them.
You know, and the one thing that struck me was that everyone counted on the Democratic passion and to get out the vote and all of that, although I was a little perplexed by hearing a commentator on another network saying that the rain worked against them. I think Republicans got wet as well in that rain, but leaving that aside, this notion that Republicans were just as jazzed to get out the vote, is there a sense that that saved the day?
You know, I think it might. Look, I think Republicans do want to see some things happen. They want to see repeal and replace of Obamacare. They want to see tax reform. Some Republicans even want to see some infrastructure. So I think they're giving maybe Paul Ryan a chance and Mitch McConnell a chance, too, to get something moving, because we haven't seen that yet. And if nothing really gets done by the end of the year, then I think voters are going to be fed up with Republicans because they're not getting anything done.
All right. We shall see. Erin, good seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, are these latest results adding a new sense of urgency to the GOP agenda? To Erin's point here, if the feeling was, all right, we want to see this agenda completed, get it completed, and they don't, or it's delayed, then what? To thehill.com's Bob Cusack, we've got Fox Business Network's Kennedy, and, of course, Charlie Gasparino. Charlie, what do you think of that? That this was voters' way of saying, we're still with you, but we sure as heck want to see you getting all this stuff done you keep touting.
Yeah, I mean, listen, look at South Carolina and Georgia in particular. That's what struck me as the candidates barely, these are very red states, so to speak, and very red areas, districts. You know, the Republicans barely getting 50%. And, you know, that's a warning sign. And that means that, you know, moderate to, you know, to fiscally conservative Democrats can pick off seats in certain parts if they could show that the Republican Party has been feckless at governing. And I think that's one of the problems here. Listen, you know, the Trump administration right now says that it's definitely going to get its tax cuts this year. It's definitely going to get health care. And I'll tell you, Neil, if you can't live up to those promises when you control Congress, well, that's a pretty interesting selling point for moderate to conservative Democrats in red states and red districts to try to flip the House. I mean, that is a compelling message. You have everything, and you blew it.
All right, and they haven't blown it yet, but Kennedy,
right,
one of the things that they're looking forward to, or voters seem to be looking for, we like, by and large, your agenda, Republicans, and we're encouraged by what you're talking about, especially when it comes to tax cuts, not across the board, but enough of their voters to stay very loyal to them, and enough for Republicans in power right now to stay presumably loyal to the president. So play this out for me the rest of the year and this agenda and how important it is just to get it done.
It's really critical, but I wouldn't be surprised if either party continues to blow it. And that's why you're not seeing party loyalty from these voters. That's not what it's about right now. You're absolutely right. Voters and the markets are both very intrigued by the idea of cleaning up health care and certainly by tax reform for businesses and individuals. But that cannot be theoretical, hopeful optimism. There have to be real results here. And that means that Republicans can't act in total opacity. There has to be some transparency of the process. We're going to see text of the Senate health care bill tomorrow, and that should make a big difference, because if they can somehow miraculously bridge the chasm between conservatives and moderates in the Senate among Republicans, then you may see some actual movement. But still, that bill has to get out of the Senate, go back to the House, and there are so many things that can go wrong.
There's a lot of things that have to go meticulously and detail-wise, step by step. But Bob, is there obviously a sense of relief among Republicans that they can hold ranks right now? But if things are delayed or they start getting or feeling the heat from either constituents who are getting impatient or financial markets that are getting worried, then what?
Well, the markets, Neil, as you know, they've been pretty patient with Congress. I think that for the first time in a while, Republicans have some momentum on their agenda. I think that they are getting closer to passing this health care bill out of the Senate. Now, getting it to Trump's desk, that's going to be very difficult. But this was something that Democrats really thought that they were going to win, and they did not, and they really didn't manage expectations very well. Remember, Trump only won that district by 1 point,
right.
And she ended up winning it by roughly 4.
That's a good point. You know, Charlie, we always talk about delivering on the goods. You have the full run of the table here. The expectation is that Republicans will take full advantage of it. They haven't yet. Tomorrow they begin the process anew with the Senate draft on health care. We're already getting a sense, and I was getting it from a number of Republican congressmen and women who don't like that they've been kept out of this process as well. But if they get through that and the timeline sticks to September on tax cuts as outlined by Paul Ryan and many at the White House, then what?
Well, that's a good thing. I don't think, listen, I don't think the markets are going to care whether it's August or September or November or October, whichever comes first there. But they just want to get it done this year. And because I mean, listen, there's an imperative to get it done this year. Who knows what's going on next year? People have to run for office, and next year's midterm elections, and Congress gets distracted. So it's kind of good to get it done this year. And if they do get it done this year, listen, all bets are off in terms of the markets. You could see the markets rally tremendously if they get it done this year. I mean, you could see an interesting bump because we're right now pricing in maybe possibly getting it done. If you do a surprise, if there's a surprise here, which getting it done this year would surprise a lot of investors.
I think you're right. They're now at the point that they're better late than never, but increasingly they don't see it this year. Kennedy, real quick, do you see it happening this year? All that stuff getting done?
If it doesn't happen this year, nothing is going to happen, and we're all doomed.
Well, the doom part kind of worries me. There goes my appetite, which Kennedy wanted to do. Bob, what do you think?
I think health care's got a better shot than it has the rest of the year. I think tax reform is going to be so hard. Tax cuts can get done, but not huge tax cuts.
All right.
Kennedy just gave me a reason to drink tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You needed that from me.
You needed that reason. All right, guys, thank you all very, very much. So what will be inside that Senate health care bill? No one knows. Democrats don't know. Only a few Republicans, and that has a lot of other Republicans saying, hey, what gives? Well, tomorrow we'll know. And shortly after that, we'll have the Congressional Budget Office scoring it. And we, when it's debuted just hours earlier on FBN, are going to crunch all the numbers for you. Who needs a CBO when you got FBN? At noon to 2 p.m., 2 hours to put it all together for you. You're welcome, America. I just do it because I love you. All right, we've got a lot going on here. Look at this market here, down about 57 points here. We're going to have the latest on this press conference on a possible terror attack that didn't turn out that way, fortunately. So much more. You're watching Your World. Stay with us. All right, it's been about a week now since that shooting on a Virginia field that has a lot of people wondering what was going on here, what was going on in the shooter's mind. We're finding out some new and rather disturbing things. Fox News Channel's Ed Henry in Washington with more on that. Hey, Ed.
Neil, good to see you. The FBI also on top of another case that's still developing this hour in Flint, Michigan. We're told that President Trump has now been briefed on this incident at the Flint airport. The FBI looking at the possibility of terror after an unknown assailant allegedly yelled Allah Akbar before stabbing an airport officer in the neck. That left the officer in critical condition, though he has now been upgraded to stable. The airport was evacuated and closed. A news conference with details could be coming very shortly this hour. Meanwhile, as you noted, the FBI revealing new details about that separate incident on a baseball field in Virginia where leftist gunman James Hodgkinson targeted several Republican lawmakers. House GOP whip Steve Scalise and 3 others shot, but it could have been far worse based on these new details. FBI officials telling us that Hodgkinson had more than 200 rounds of ammunition at a local storage unit. He still fired over 60 shots. shots, about 50 of them from a rifle, the others from a 9mm handgun. And they found that he was searching online for possible gatherings of Republican lawmakers and a list of names of GOP members of Congress, though there is still no indication they were under direct threat. FBI official Timothy Slater saying Hodgkinson acted alone, and this appears to have been a spontaneous shooting at the ball field.
While the shooter was not known to have a history of diagnosed mental illness, he is known, or was known, to have an anger management problem. I think he was struggling in a lot of aspects of his life. I think by his post on social media, he spoke a lot about anti-Republican rhetoric.
Thankfully, though, we do have some good news to report about this. Congressman Scalise, yes, has been upgraded from serious to fair condition. House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy joking today, the first clue to him that Scalise is actually improving, he's started to give GOP leaders grief about what they're doing with legislation on the House floor. The second guessing from Scalise, a sure sign that maybe he's on the mend. Neil?
That is very good to hear. Ed, thank you very much. Ed Henry. On the phone with us now, former FBI Assistant Director James Kellstrom on both these developing stories. James, always good to have you. First off, on the Scalise situation and the shooter, and a few more details about the anger that was fomenting there. There's apparently very few ways to track that down ahead of time, but we do know that that was boiling for a long time. What do you think?
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. And, you know, it's surprising to me that they didn't talk about motive at all, other than to mention that the guy had some, I guess, Facebook rantings about the GOP. But it seems like from press reports it goes a little further than that.
You know, I want to switch gears, if you don't mind, James, in this incident in Michigan at the airport where an officer was stabbed in the neck. It was at first critical condition, now stable. But all points, signs point to someone who, obviously was extreme, shouted Allah Akbar. We keep seeing this playing out in different locales across the country, the world. Authorities are going to be speaking to the press very shortly on this, but this was at an airport, and this was with no warning, and there you go. That's what you know. That's what we have. What do you think?
Well, Neil, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see things like this. You know, the motive is sort of global. I mean, it's broadcast, over the internet and the public media. So there are going to be people that are conspiratorial, that react to this jihad, and there's going to be lone, lunatics that I have no idea if this person at the Flint airport was by himself or not, but I think it's really irrelevant to a large extent, other than conspiracy usually involves things that are going to kill a lot more people than just one person, but that's not necessarily the case depending on what type of weapon they use. But yeah, Neil, I think we're going to see more and more of this throughout the West.
You think about it, James. It said talked about it on incidents that on airlines, but now increasingly, if you think of the attack about a year and a half ago at an airport, you almost wonder where do you put up the defense shields? Where do you put up the security? Where do you separate the public and the screening to prevent harm to the public? But it does sort of twist around the old adage, we have our planes to worry about. No, sometimes it isn't even when you're near the plane.
I know, but Neil, I think we need to do a much better job, without changing, necessarily, not changing the Constitution, but, the Attorney General guidelines, the political correct training that is absent, the motive for this jihad. These are things that have to change, just like the Prime Minister of Great Britain said the other day. We have to do things differently. I mean, we've been just sitting back, basically, and taking this, and it's just a matter of time before something, actually kills a lot of people. So I don't think, I'm not saying we need a police state, but we need to have a lot more sensibility about, and good strategy, a lot of which President Trump wants to do. about vetting. You know, heretofore, we didn't have a clue who these people were, whether they were Sharia people, which is totally inconsistent with our Constitution, totally inconsistent with, you know, the
we got to do a lot more. We got to do a lot more of it. All right, thank you very much.
There's just a lot more things that have to be done,
James.
including getting
the
wet blanket of political.
All right, Ralph Norman yesterday giving a thumbs up after winning that special election in South Carolina's 5th District, later tweeting out, now let's get to work. The race closer than a lot of people expected. Still, a W is a W, and he is now the congressman-elect on his way to Washington. Sir, very good to have you. Congratulations.
My pleasure, Neil. Glad to be here.
I like when you're saying let's get to work. I mean, obviously voters who in these special elections, and yours was the 4th, if you want to put it, for want of a better term, and the others we've seen, Republicans have won them all, but by narrower margins than last fall. And I'm wondering whether voters are sort of saying, yeah, we're still with you, Republicans, but you better get the job done. What do you think?
Well, that's exactly right. The conservatives control the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, and they want meaningful health care. They want regulations cut. They don't want to hear gridlock. And the downside for all conservatives, if nothing gets done, we all go out. And we've got to sell our story, Neil. We've got to tell the voters what we're doing and why it matters, and I look forward to doing that.
Do you worry when many in your party in the Senate, maybe there are very good reasons for this, sort of plot a health care draft behind closed doors? Only a few Republicans know. I talked to your future colleagues in the House today who said they don't like that. And these are coming from Republicans who didn't like the way this has been crafted. What do you say?
Well, that's what we're going to have to get into, as they say, the devil's in the details.
Right.
We'll have to look at it and make sure it's meaningful legislation. As long as it's meaningful and people, it's real, when people can get lower deductibles, it's affordable, the physicians buy into it, I think it'll sell. I think the thing that's not on the table is if we don't get anything. That's not an option. So we've got to produce, and as I mentioned, we've got to go to work. And I hope we can work the month of August and get something passed.
Oh, you'd be for that. You'd work through the month of August to get this stuff done.
Yes, I mean, the country, I mean, look what happened in Tennessee when Humana left and the 20 to 30,000 people were stranded.
Right.
We can't let that happen to Americans regardless of the state. So I think they're looking for something, and, you know, they don't really they don't get that the House passed it and the Senate is bogged down. They just want to see something that's real, something that they can identify with, and that is meaningful.
All right. The timetable looks like getting this thing out before the public tomorrow morning, as you know, and then they're going to debate a little bit, well, not too long, and then put it up for a vote, get it settled within a matter of weeks, I understand, so to set the stage for tax cuts in September. And all of that done this year. Is that doable? And are you afraid if it isn't done, then there could be trouble?
It's doable if we can put it a priority and again, go to work. And no, it's not going to sell well. It's not going to sell well to my voters in the 5th District if we don't come away with anything. Deadlock just cannot continue to be an option. The last 8 years has been deadlocked, but for a good reason. A lot of the legislation that President Obama had was bad.
Yeah, let me then I'm sorry, I want to be clear on the tax cut thing, if you don't mind, Mr. Norman. And that is this notion that some in your party seem to think that tax cuts should be paid for. They should be deficit neutral, revenue neutral. You know the drill. Do you subscribe to that opinion? Do you think that they should be very, very big, get the bang for the buck, even if you have short-term deficits? Or do you think you've got to be very cognizant of that? The House leadership seems to think, as does Mitch McConnell in the Senate, no, they should be paid for and they should be revenue neutral. You say what?
Well, yeah, the fact is we're $20 trillion in the hole. The fact is we can't continue to kick the can down the road to raise the debt ceiling without any cuts anywhere, or they call them cuts, but as former Congressman Mick Mulvaney mentioned, it's just cuts to the increases that were built in.
That's very true.
So I think we've got to have some meaningful cuts that are not just in word, it's got to be in deed.
So in other words, you're open to big tax cuts, but offsetting them with spending cuts.
Exactly. Look at the bloated budget as it is. I don't think I can sell to our voters in our district that there's nothing to cut in the federal budget. Nobody, I think, sees that or would agree with that.
Yeah. How instrumental do you think, or how much of an issue do you think President Trump was in your election?
Well, I just talked to the president before I came on here. I think we've got to sell what he's done. You know, the laws that, if you compare the Obama administration and President Trump's, the laws that were signed and into statute, he had 30 in the first 100 days. Obama had 15. If you look at the legislation that the House passed in the first 100 days, 104 to 94. We've got to publicize and tell the voters this is what he's done. If you listen, other than Fox News, if you listen to the media, he hasn't done anything. It's stalemated. Russia's done this. Russia's done that. We've got to sell the story of the good things President Trump has done. And as I mentioned in my talk last night, the appointment of Neil Gorsuch to the United States Supreme Court is one of the greatest things he's done. And we've got to lead off with that.
All right, Ralph Norman, again, congratulations on your big victory. Look forward to see you in well of the House very soon. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, you have the big meeting of Secretary of Defense Mattis, Secretary of State Tillerson, with Chinese officials all talking about North Korea and whether North Korea is being at all reined in by China. It doesn't look that way.
You totaled your brand new car. Nobody's hurt.
With the truth, that sort of thing.
All right, this is a position the Chinese, for example, do not want to be in. Mad Dog is mad. Secretary of Defense James Mattis right now adding his frustration to that of the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson that the Chinese aren't doing enough to rein in the North Koreans. The president has tweeted as much. Some saying a little dig at the Chinese that they tried and failed. Move on. Retired four-star General Jack Keane here on all of that. General, what do you think? The message we sent to this powwow with top officials from China, we're frustrated not only on these missile tests, but now them essentially letting die American citizens like this young man from Ohio. What do you think?
Yeah, I think largely this powwow that took place today dealt with the centerpiece being the United States' frustration that China really isn't doing enough. After all, they had committed to do a number of things. I think our folks don't believe they've done much of anything. They gave them about
General, what do you think?
I totally agree with them. I think they gave them 4 or 5 specific things to do, from what I understand, and they were not accomplished. Now, this press conference did make some news because Tillerson came out and said something that's never been said before, and that China agrees with the United States that North Korea should denuclearize. That is a new statement. Now, based on the frustration that we have with good evidence that China hasn't moved on the initial things we asked them to do, if they agree in principle with denuclearization, it remains to be seen what actions will they take in support of that, because they really have more cards to play than we do here, for all the reasons we have stated before, that 90% of economic dependency of North Korea is on China, and China is holding these cards. So going forward here, I think this administration, Tillerson, as you said, Mad Dog Mattis, and H.R. McMaster's are going to have China on a tight string from here on out.
But, you know, I always get the impression, General, that China just strings us along. Obviously, much of this was inspired soon after the president was inaugurated and met with the Chinese leader in Mar-a-Lago, that he was going to hold off on calling him a currency manipulator, trade manipulator, all that, if they went to work on dealing with the North Koreans. Well, it's been months since then. Nothing's happened. And if anything, it's gotten worse. So we obviously have to attach something to this, or a metric by which we can track what the Chinese are doing, or a timetable to do it. What do you think?
Well, I think, listen, I believe the administration, you know, having spoken to some of them, are very clear-eyed in what they're dealing with China and what their track record is of gaming in the United States to their own advantage. I believe they've got in their hip pocket a comprehensive strategy that gets tough on China. It would start with likely some sanctions on China for the first time by the United States ever, and also a get tough dealing with North Korea, and a get tough strategy dealing with the South China Sea and China's determination to dominate the Pacific and Asia at the U.S. expenses.
We got at least rein that in. The president, as your speaking general, is at Joint Base Andrews, sending Air Force One on his way to Iowa tonight. We'll be making, it's a campaign event largely, but one in which he might bring up these subjects about the threats in the world, the North Koreans chief among them right now. There has been talk, as you know, General, about the North Koreans releasing the 3 remaining American hostages they have. I talked to former Ambassador Richardson on this subject, who told me that that would be a good gesture, but he wasn't confident of it. Are you?
No, I'm not, but I think it's job one to try to get those 3 out of there, and certainly China could assist with that. I think the other thing is the State Department, once and for all, has got to slap a travel ban on going to North Korea. I mean, it's just sort of ridiculous that we've got these youngsters going up to North Korea for some kind of adventure.
Yeah, John McCain said that they get in trouble, they're on their own, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think we can assist them a little bit by absolutely slapping a travel ban down, as opposed to just some travel restriction, which is more of a warning than anything else. And maybe we can get the attention of these youngsters who, you know, they're invulnerable. You know what the age group is. You know, we all understand that.
Yeah, many, many decades ago, I could relate. General, thank you very much. Good seeing you, my friend.
Okay, good talking to you.
All right, well, first day of summer, and we have got soaring heat throughout much of the Southwest, and now a tropical storm bearing down on the Gulf. Wow, we're starting summer with a bang here. We got a tropical storm, Cindy, bearing down on the Gulf. We've got a heat wave. We've got so much going on out in the Southwest. And emergency officials already preparing, again, for what could be a very wet, very nasty storm along Louisiana. Fox News correspondent Casey Stiegel live in Holly Beach, Louisiana, with an update there. What do you have there, Casey?
Hey, Neil, good to see you. The rain, boy, really started coming down just in the last few minutes as we were waiting to go on with you for this live report. It's been on again, off again. The storm itself, about 10 hours or so from making landfall somewhere near this spot, right along the Texas and Louisiana border. That is what all of the models out of the National Hurricane Center seem to show. Everyone in agreement on that. A state of emergency has been declared here in Louisiana and over in Alabama as well. Cindy's impacts could likely be felt from southeast Texas all the way to the Florida Panhandle. The system packing winds of about 50 miles per hour, not strong enough, we know, to be classified as a hurricane, but forecasters say the primary threat, extremely heavy rainfall. In fact, 6 to 9 inches of rain could come down, more than a foot in some isolated areas, according to the advisories. So the sandbags are making an appearance, folks doing anything they can to keep the water out. Meantime, this tropical system has been lingering in the Gulf now for days and apparently posed a problem for a United Airlines flight yesterday. Listen to this. 14 people hurt, 7 taken to the hospital after the plane hit severe turbulence as it cruised near Cancun, Mexico, close to the outskirts of Hurricane Cindy, or Tropical Storm Cindy. United Flight 1031 landed safely in Houston yesterday with about 160 people on board. They were coming in from Panama City. Passengers say that bumpy ride lasted for about 20 minutes or so. The condition of those who were hurt unknown at this time. So by the air and by land, Tropical Storm Cindy causing some big problems for folks in this part of the country. Neil?
Casey, be safe yourself. Thank you, my friend. Casey in Holly Beach, Louisiana. Well, a near record heat wave, as I told you, scorching the Southwest, and you know the problems with that. Power outages, flights that can't take up or down. Fox News meteorologist Adam Klotz on the latest there. Adam.
Hey there, Neil. The bad news with this one is it's not going anywhere, at least not too quickly. Here's what we're looking at. Heat advisories across, yes, the Southwest, the desert Southwest, but stretching into portions of California as well. You're looking down to Tucson and Phoenix, up towards Las Vegas, and then running all the way into central California, Sacramento running into northern California, Fresno. Temperatures currently sitting around 100 degrees there. Again, there's still a little bit of time for these temps to climb here throughout the afternoon hours, but you're already looking at impressive numbers from 117, 111 there in the Phoenix area, Vegas getting up close to 110. With a couple more hours of this extreme heat, these numbers will climb only higher. We're eventually going to be talking about getting up close to that 120 range again into the Phoenix area, actually topping off at 118. Now, maybe we're going to cool off just a little bit the next couple of days, but I think from 118 to dropping down to maybe 115, it's really tough to tell. You do begin to see some of this extreme heat that's stretching all the way to the middle of the country, beginning to back down a little bit. But if you're in the desert Southwest, it's really going to be hard to escape this, at least through the weekend. So you go from 118 today to 113 for your Thursday, down to 112 on Friday. I know that's not horribly cool. And then you jump back up another 5 degrees or so for Saturday and Sunday. So unfortunately, what they're battling right now, Neil, they're going to be battling it all the way through the weekend.
It's amazing where 112 is a cool-off.
A cool-down. Can you
yeah,
believe
right?
it? I know. It's still hot. You still want to be indoors.
Amazing. All right,
Yep.
Adam, thank you. All right, I told you last week, Amazon taking over your kitchen, right, by purchasing Whole Foods. And now department stores are feeling the pinch as well, because Amazon now wants to make sure you get your clothes from Amazon and only Amazon. Wait till we tell you how easy they're going to make it, too, after this.